Thank you, David. Hi, Angelique and Ashley.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Happy to have you all here today with all of us. Since David already introduced you guys, let's just get straight into the panel. So we had the opportunity to speak a couple of weeks ago. Some really interesting things were uncovered when we chatted, but let's just start with the thing that we all have to kind of start with, which is it's been a crazy 2020. There's been the pandemic, social injustice, the election, so much is going on. So maybe we could kick off with Angelique. How have the stay-at-home orders and COVID-19 changed the fashion industry and Stitch Fix? Maybe I know that's a big question, but
No, I think that's a great question. A tough place to start, but a good one. You know what? I think the fashion industry is one of the industries that's been most impacted in the last year. Not only in the past, consumers were going out experiencing with brands and retail stores, and building a connection with fashion companies in retail, at events, at fashion shows, on runways. That has fully shifted to online digital now. For us at Stitch Fix, obviously being a digital platform, we haven't been impacted, and we're lucky in the sense that we haven't been impacted since we don't have retail locations. But it's been an industry where trends have shifted. I'm sure all of us now on this call, whether you're attending on the panel or an attendee, that work from home look and feel, where you're tough. It's kind of like camera presenting, but everything else is loungewear. I know myself, I'm wearing joggers right now. So trends have shifted towards athleisure, lounge, comfort, and much less around, event, occasion wear, and things like that. So not only has the place where we're connecting with brands changed from retail to fully online digital, but also the way that we're actually wearing our clothes and expressing ourselves via our clothing. So the fashion industry has definitely changed quite significantly. And it's also a place related back to Gen Z. It's also a place where now, fashion companies, I want to say, have been slightly delayed in sharing their values and their experiences up front, but now with this last year have kind of been forced to peel, peel that part of them back and not be aspirational anymore, but definitely, fully committal to what their values, their ethics are, and put that at the forefront of their brand campaigns and their brand marketing.
yeah, thank you for that. So much has changed, but I still think that what's so fascinating about this pandemic, probably versus the 2018 or 1918 one, is that we are all on Zoom or FaceTime or something. So you still see from the waist up. So people are still like seeing, how the fashion is being expressed right now, like you said. Ashley, what about the beverage category and COVID and everything? How have you guys been impacted and how are you, how's it going now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Angelique hit it. Everything is turned virtual. And so now we're literally at home for everything, whether it's work, whether it's play, like your home base is monumental. And so how you attribute fun from that, how you create connections, how you connect with those in your pod, in your, kind of out secondary pod, but then also brands. That's definitely changed. And so not only has that been driven by obviously the pandemic, but then you have that social overlay that happened, and there was a tipping point, and so it really did force this kind of creation of a platform or a discourse, I should say, where Gen Z was forcing brands to really be vocal or kind of talk about what their brand purpose was or have this purpose driven marketing. And that really came to the forefront specifically within this pandemic. And so I guess the easy answer is obviously everything's virtual. So dining in went away, right? Takeout and delivery went up. But then really this idea of purpose driven marketing, that was obviously the
Yeah, I mean that that I think kind of leads into the next part. Why don't we talk about that just a little bit more and how Gen Z does seem to be the generation that cares the most about brand values. I mean, that is stereotypical. I remember Jane Fonda stopped working with Wells Fargo over their investment behavior, and so everyone can do it. But when we spoke, each of you spoke about different things that your companies were doing in reaction to and to basically help out consumers or different things. So, Angelique, I'm hoping you could talk a little bit more. We talked about Elevate and your ambassador program and how that adapted. Could you give us some insights into that?
Yeah, I think exactly to what Ashley was saying about purpose-driven marketing. We were definitely, one of the brands to hop in and be able to not only create new campaigns and new programs for our audiences, our designers, our clients, but then also work with our existing ambassadors to just really help spread the message and the values for what Stitch Fix stands for. So in terms of Elevate, we actually launched a grant and mentorship program to help BIPOC designers and entrepreneurs within the fashion space, grow, receive mentorship from not only our CEO, Katrina, but also from Harlem's Fashion Row, Brandis Daniel, who's helping, spearhead the Elevate program with us. And the purpose of this is really to help increase the number of BIPOC designers and fashion founders, which we carry not only at Stitch Fix, but within the whole of the fashion industry overall. So that was a campaign that we kicked off. We've been thinking about it for a while, but it's definitely been at the forefront of not only our thoughts and at the consumer thoughts throughout, some of the systemic changes that have been happening in the conversations that have been going on throughout the year. So that's for Elevate. And then in terms of our ambassadors, we've actually always relied on our ambassadors to work with us not only as spokespeople and influencers and, be the face and voice of a campaign, but now throughout, the pandemic and throughout this year, we've actually relied on them for much more than that. We've relied on them to, be an extension of the Stitch Fix voice, to be, yes, the face and voice of a campaign, but also to spearhead that campaign. So whether they were designing it, whether they were part of, the messaging and the crafting, we allowed we're not allowed, but we worked with all of our ambassadors to create their own campaigns that felt right for them. So whether, it's a Black ambassador program that we kicked off, and that was true to a few of our ambassadors, and they're Black themselves, and they felt like this was important for them to kick off. Or we worked with a few other ambassadors within our plus size community to create and launch plus size clothing collections that were representative of them and inclusive of different body sizes. So really worked with our ambassadors in a way that we haven't ever before, which was very much more, representative of them and them as a byproduct of our brand. So ambassador first, brand second in this case, which again is true to our core values.
Yeah, it's very authentic. And having it start with the consumer and like culture first and being part of that and servicing that. Ashley, what about Mountain Dew? We talked about the Real Change Fund and Back to Badass, so I'm hoping you can teach us more about what those two programs are.
Yeah, of course. And so, like we were kind of mentioning before, this was a really pivotal year. It was kind of like an inflection point when it came to society and specifically Gen Z kind of pushing this idea of brands being very value driven or purpose driven, I should say, and really being clear on what their brand values are. And so out of that came this idea of real change and what Mountain Dew could do to really push real change. And so PepsiCo, from that larger brand umbrella standpoint, our CEO, Ramon Labarda, basically created this initiative where we committed or will be committing $400 million over the next 5 years to really make change within the Black community from a people, community, and business standpoint. And so when that trickles down to brands, it's great to do that. But I think when it comes to Gen Z, they really want you to articulate from a brand standpoint what that means. And so for Mountain Dew, there was this awesome corporate mission, but what could we do that made sense for our brand? Being very clear that our brand hasn't necessarily had the deepest heritage when it comes to the Black community and like being a platform for that cohort. And so what I had the pleasure of driving was this idea of real change for the Black community within this broader umbrella that clearly stated that we, over the next 5 years, would basically institute real change in a way of providing a platform, whether it be resources or funding for Black entrepreneurs when it comes to what they are doing in the short term or really what they're doing in the long term. And so looking at institutions like HBCUs, where you have Black entrepreneurs come up through the system, really trying to get Mountain Dew's platform to be one that not only these entrepreneurs could tap into from a resource standpoint, but that one that we could really collaborate with these institutions and foster real change in the short as well as long term. So we have a really big announcement coming up next week. I can't share much more than that, but I think what it shows you, because this was not on the radar as of February, right? Everyone was just living their life and the pandemic happened. And then it was this moment of, what are we gonna do, not only in a pandemic, but kind of in this modern day like civil crisis that we're facing. And it was an awesome opportunity that I think was really instigated by Gen Z to say, what are you gonna do and how are you gonna follow through? And I think without that kind of flame that Gen Z kind of really initiated, we wouldn't have gotten to this awesome initiative that I'm talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely fascinating. I'm Gen X, and so I think that one of the most interesting things that I've seen occurring, what you guys just echoed in Gen Z, but also, during the pandemic, is this feedback loop of talking to consumers or listening to consumers. And one thing, like one super obvious example, Angelique, to me, was in the fashion industry. Like, I've always been fascinated how every year they come out with like, this is what's in fashion, these are the colors, this is the boot cut, and you're like, oh my God, like I need to update my wardrobe. Obviously creating opportunities to buy more, but during this time, obviously it's important to be listening to what consumers need, not telling them what they need. And I think all industries have definitely adapted to that in one way or another. So Angelique, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that's changed the fashion world.
Yeah, you know what? I think what's really great about Gen Z and how the fashion world has shifted, primarily starting with a brand campaign on social media or showcasing collections on social media, is that it's a lot more democratic now. It used to be, or the fashion industry used to be, a place where if you were invited to a fashion show, you were either a buyer or you were either, a celebrity, whether you were an artist or whether you were, a celebrity in your own right in the fashion world. And via social media, which is not unique to this year here, but over the last, I want to say 6 or 7 years now, we've seen, the resurgence of like bloggers come up at fashion shows, the resurgence of brands themselves live streaming their runway on social media, whether that's like on Twitch or YouTube Live or Instagram Live or whatnot. And so bringing that democracy and bringing the availability to see what's on the runway a year before it's actually launched in stores to everyone, and not only buyers or editors at fashion magazines, I think that has shifted the way in which we consume as well. I think the fashion industry overall, and specifically for Gen Z, is not only dictated now with like, this fashion editor said that this was coming up for spring. I'm in November, let me plan my spring buys for that. It's no longer, I think, relevant. Right now, it's less about what's trending and what feels unique and personalized to the Gen Z generation. I think that's why brands, are now launching collections that are fully outside of the traditional cycle, where you used to have fall, winter together at the runway show, or you had spring, summer together. Now you have like exclusive drops, online exclusives or designer collabs that are launching in every which way and on various platforms. If you look at some examples like Gucci, for example, who, launched one of their latest sustainable collections fully online in a gaming platform. This was just a few weeks ago. Those are different ways in which not only Gen Z are interacting with brands and products, but also showcasing, back to your conversation about, brands speaking to their audiences, and then also, having audiences or followers listen in. With Gen Z, it's fully two-way conversation now. And so building that dialogue where you can comment in, you could try it in on your avatar, for example, or you can attend a Twitch live and see one of your favorite, celebrities, artists, designers, or partners wear something as they're navigating, let's say, a game. There's a lot more interaction and interactability, and there's a lot more two-way conversation where you're no longer being dictated what a brand is saying or what fashion editors are saying are trendy, but you're rather seeing it in a plethora, and you're able to choose, personalization. This fits for me, and this is what I'm going to wear, no matter who says that it's trending. And so that's one of the major shifts that we've seen in the industry, but then also a shift that Gen Z has brought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's so interesting to see too is companies like StockX that started for sneakers, but then got into luxury, and like all these little drops that you see, and they're like the latest small batch stuff is on those platforms. And that's something that, a decade ago, I don't think that you would have necessarily thought that would happen, that kind of merging of those two, like streetwear, couture.
Gabrielle, even to that example, Supreme, I mean, they were just purchased by Vans. Like, that is 100%, I would argue, driven by Gen Z, and this idea of, what was fringe now becoming mainstream because of this idea, like Angelique said, this democratization of communication, and the fact that it's not a one-way street of brands or major platforms just speaking at people, but it's really a two-way conversation. Now you have these awesome examples of these smaller brands that probably wouldn't have lasted 10 years ago, to your point, but we're seeing, things catch like fire, and you realize that, there's definitely a market. And with consumer insights, as well as Gen Z being so vocal, they're telling you what they want, and it's just sometimes our job to listen.
Exactly.
I wonder, and speaking of that specifically with Mountain Dew, because I think that there have been seismic shifts in how people market, and just in the fashion example, when you were talking about runway shows, like I remember when people were like, why can't a runway show be streamed? And I forget who was the first one to stream it, but it was so controversial because they were so interested in this like aspiration. No, we must be aspirational and almost unattainable. But for you, Ashley, like how fast can, like, it seems like companies are moving faster, but obviously PepsiCo, listening to Gen Z, like how fast can that feedback loop go, or how have you guys adapted?
Well, I mean, we are a Fortune 100 company. You want to move fast, but at the end of the day, there are certain restrictions in place so that, crazy people like me can't like have all the power and do crazy things and then get in trouble. So thankfully legal and my bosses are there to keep us on track. But I think what's awesome is that social media really helps you kind of test and learn quickly. And you can do it in a way that seems unique and precise with targeting or with creating long-standing relationships with certain consumers. So like loyalty platforms, et cetera. That's a way that you can definitely seed things and then potentially bring them to market quicker. But I think generally, to your point, like not just PepsiCo, I'm sure Angelique, Stitch Fix is kind of in the same place, even though you guys are, built a little differently and somewhat smaller. People are just trying to like bring things quicker because consumers, specifically Gen Z, they want things faster. And so sometimes I think it's important to distinguish like trends that you should play in and trends that you shouldn't. And that always goes back to your brand positioning and kind of your North Star. Brands are these dynamic things. They shouldn't be stagnant. They're kind of like people, like they should evolve, but you shouldn't kind of go all the way left and kind of just go with the wind and try to play in everything, because then you don't really stand for anything, right? So I think it's a really interesting time to test and learn. And so we definitely use social to do that because of that feedback loop that you can get so quickly. But it's just about what you scale and what you don't.
And I think what you said is so true, because trends come, trends go, and some of them are lasting or more impactful, and some of them are not. We get inbound questions all the time about, like, a game that's like all the rage, and then, but what brands don't necessarily realize is, yeah, they had like a bajillion installs at the beginning, but their engagement and installs have dipped, and you're not keeping up with it fast enough because you're not in the industry. So speaking of that and social platforms for Gen Z, why don't we talk about influencer marketing a little bit? You can't talk about Gen Z without talking about influencer marketing. Angelique, well, you kind of already touched on it, ambassadors, democratization of fashion. Could you kind of go a little bit more about how you work with influencers, how your ambassadors are influencers? But I'm assuming you also have kind of bigger alignments with your brands. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, for sure. We actually run multiple streams of influencer work at Stitch Fix. So there's nothing, I want to say like 10 years ago, you said influencer streams is just like you pay them or you gift them and in exchange they post. We are so far from that now. We have, I want to say, 6 streams of influencer work. So we work in an ambassador capacity in most instances. And what that means is that's longer term partnerships. So there's no one and done, quick, like rapid deals. I know that when we were chatting a few weeks ago, Ashley and I were actually, kind of chuckling about, what was it called? The skinny tea or skinny me tea that we used to see the Kardashians post. And then the next day they would be posting like Carl's Jr. or whatnot. And it was like this one and done type of relationship. The way that we work at Stitch Fix is like that polar opposite, where it's longer term because we are a personalized platform. And it's really about like your personal look. And so, what one ambassador, what one influencer will be getting out of our platform versus someone else, and the look and the fix that they'll receive on a monthly basis is completely tailored to them. We also worked with them in that way. So we partner with them for longer term, whether that's like yearly contracts or multiple months at a time, or multiple years at a time, to not only, create content for us, be the face and voice of our campaigns, but also act as spokespeople for us. So we, bring them on panels and conferences, put them in front of media on our behalf to actually just genuinely speak about our relationship together and about their experience using Stitch Fix. Most times we actually don't necessarily PR prep them or anything like that. We actually just introduce both parties to have an honest and open and genuine discussion. Because back to our topic of Gen Z, authenticity being the most important. We want our ambassadors to actually love, working with us and love the clothing they receive. And so keeping it honest and open-ended is what we felt and what we feel is most genuine. So that's one stream of work. I think with obviously the pandemic, a lot of brands, and this is definitely not only for Stitch Fix, have shifted to a place where our in-studios or in-house studios are shut down. And so, for photo shoots or for discussing and showcasing the latest trends, it's no longer like you can bring in and photograph, a group of models to do that. So we've also shifted to a place where some of our ambassadors and influencers are now content creators for us, whether that's creating long form video or like quick fun TikTok style rapid video movement with dances, or actual, photo shoot, where then we'll bring it in-house and make that as part of a larger campaign. So there's different streams of work in which we've dabbled and we keep dabbling in the influencer space. I want to say that a lot of the influencer and ambassador marketing that we do is some of our bread and butter. If you look at our social across our platforms, whether that's men's, women's, or kids, you'll see and recognize our ambassadors being the face and voice of our brand. And again, that's all authentic, which is really great, because sometimes, of course, there's longer term partnerships that are paid, but what we see out of that is that there's a lot more content coming out of it, because sometimes one of our influencers is just really ecstatic about receiving a box or a fix. And they'll be posting about it and talking about it in media. And it'll almost come as a surprise to us. But that's kind of like the best thing as possible, because it feels so real to them, to their platforms, their followers, and thus to our followers too.
Yeah, it's so funny because just listening to you, and I know I keep saying, I'm the old Gen Xer, but I worked at Yahoo, and I remember it was so controversial, like UGC. Brands were like, oh my God, what happens if they take my brand and like they say a bad word, or they take my license, and like fan art, no fan art. And like, it's obviously changed a lot. We have a bunch of questions, so I'm gonna move to those in a second. I just wanna like finish it off because Ashley talked about something in this topic before that, what Angelique just touched on was also the democratization of brands, not only just fashion, but brands. And we were talking about micro influencers, and I was, interested about macro versus micro, or like a rookie versus a star. You were talking to that. So can you tell us a little bit more about your approach there?
Yeah, absolutely. So with NBA, I mean, obviously you have the gamut of stars, and you have those like superstar players like a LeBron James, just for illustrative purposes. And then you have those rookies that are just coming up. And so kind of the strategy that we've taken on Mountain Dew, we 100% want players that want to partner with us and be a part of this brand. Like Angelique was saying, kind of the talent you bring on, it's no longer a transactional relationship, right? You want someone that really is a champion of your brand, whether they're in the spotlight and when they're not. And that really helps drive authenticity. And so what we've done is really be choiceful about the players that we partner with, really learn about what their passions are on and off the court, and then bring them on. And they could be someone like a Zion Williamson, who literally is like everyone's clamoring for when he's on next or what's going on with him. And, but he is technically a rookie, definitely a star that shot out quick out the gate. Or we partner with someone like a Jaren Jackson Jr., who is still coming up in the ranks, or even an Asia Wilson. She has been an awesome WNBA player as well as talent for Mountain Dew for people don't know, but almost 4 years now. And we were with her in the beginning when, she really wasn't, her star power wasn't as, powerful as it is now. But since we partnered with her in the very beginning and have been on the journey with her, that relationship that we have with her, and the connection and the way she talks about the brand, it's so authentic that it makes it richer than sometimes when you sign just a bigger name because they have more Instagram followers or kind of just more whatever you calculate as influential power. And so what we specifically were talking about is this idea of the macro versus micro influencer. And so, there are still the moments where you use someone like, let's say Kardashian for illustrative purposes, because they have like a huge reach and a big platform. But I think kind of where we're going is more of these micro influencers and people that have a stronger connection to a smaller group of people. But their connection is so authentic and so rich and so robust that, what they're doing, their tribe will follow. And obviously you use that relationship in an authentic way and one that's meaningful. And then similarly, one that's, kind of dual path, and that they, do something for you, you do something for them. It's not just transactional all the way.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So let's get to some of these questions. There's so many, and I get to choose the ones that, I think this one's an interesting one. Maybe just really quickly, I'm curious, is there a difference? How does marketing to Gen Z differ from marketing to millennials? Is there a difference?
Yes.
Okay, Angelique, tell us.
Sorry, I got passionate about that one. Yeah, I think there definitely is a difference, not only in the look and feel of, let's say, assets or campaigns, but also the way that it's, trickled out and brought out. So, for example, if you're marketing to millennials versus Gen Z, the look and feel of millennial marketing, social, influencer, integrated campaign assets are still more polished, more refined. There's still a bit of that aspirational aspect. So for example, if you look in the influencer space, it's like that clean background, white light, a bit more of the, of like, there's a bit more of a separation, whereas Gen Z is the complete opposite. You know, looking at campaigns that are Gen Z focused, you'll find things that are a lot more raw, unedited. There's definitely no Photoshop when we're editing in the assets there. The backgrounds will be messy. People will be showcasing, you know, if you look at TikTok, there's like one of the most like shared is one of the platform's biggest influencers. Like she had a plastic surgery and like was showcasing her bandages for weeks on end and just bringing us through that full process. Whereas from an influencer standpoint, for millennials, it would be a lot more like before and after, and there'd be a lot more staging or storytelling. And again, that's not from a brand perspective, just from an influencer perspective, but that gives you a bit of the background on, you know, the look and feel, and then also how to approach it to market. I think, again, on authenticity, it has to really be ingrained with that influencers or the celebrities tribe, to what Ashley was saying. It has to feel authentic to them. And so if you're launching a new handbag, I know in our conversation we're chatting, like when Dior launched their new saddlebag, you saw all of a sudden all of the top millennial influencers, like the top 12 in the world in the fashion industry, post the saddlebag in the same kind of pose and format. And it launched on the exact same day last year. Versus if you look at what's Gen Z focused, it'll be like a trickle. There might be someone who's teaching us a new dance on TikTok, someone who's bringing it over to Twitch, someone who's bringing, you know, the collection's been digitally designed for Animal Crossing. And so it'll be spattered in a bunch of different ways with niche audiences that care about different things for the exact same product launch, but just in a way that connects to them, in which they can interact and have that two-way dialogue, as opposed to feeling like an aspirational goals type of marketing.
So interesting. I think that's, I can see that. I see what you're saying. Okay, I'm going to give this one to Ashley. Reaching just strategy, what types of new media and be leveraging to reach our audiences?
Well, I mean, I think you have to have just a very diverse social digital strategy in general. I mean, Instagram still remains the place where you get a lot of scale, but it's basically about the other capabilities that Instagram has. And so it could be Instagram stories, maybe weighting more of your creative on that piece versus those more polished, like what Angelique was saying, those static posts that sometimes just are more geared towards millennials. Just by sheer fact of Gen Z, they consume so much content and are literally going through everything. And so it's more about some things like Insta stories, maybe even reels. You could, for example, on Reddit, like that's a sub-community, or there are sub-communities on Reddit that are so just avid fans, and they just talk amongst themselves, not necessarily a place to like, you know, pulse out a campaign, but that's also an awesome place to go and just learn about what's being talked about there. Then you go to YouTube, et cetera. So I think it's very specific on what the brand is, where the brand has played before, and then what the objectives are. But I think if you're trying to still hit scale, I think Instagram is probably just the place to go.
Okay. Yeah. What, so I guess multi-generations can also love the same platforms, because I'm like a huge Instagram way. Okay. As a consumer, what brands are leaders in this space? So I don't know if necessarily you have to answer as a consumer. This is a question from the audience, but what do you think what brands are leaders in this space of Gen Z marketing?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, Ben & Jerry's is currently killing it. Like Ben & Jerry's over the last, I think, 9 months has really become kind of everyone's favorite ice cream. But everyone's just like kind of clamoring as to see like what they'll do next. I'm always impressed by kind of how they quickly synthesize info and then kind of regurgitate it in a way that is so on point with their brand, whether it be the visuals that they have, but then so like on point with the topic. So I feel like Ben & Jerry's really has been a clear winner for this year.
And I'm always also fascinated by, like, it's owned by Unilever, which
I
is
know.
it's like huge traditional. And I always wonder, was it in their contract when they were acquired that they still got 100% control of their marketing or what?
I don't know. I would love to hear what their legal team is doing behind the scenes versus everyone else's, you know, all the other Unilever brands.
Right. So like we have our own legal, our own.
Exactly.
Angelique, what about you? What are yours for Gen Z marketing or Gen Z?
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I don't want to just, you know, label it as Gen Z marketing, but in terms of brands that are really quickly able to adapt, react, and be at the forefront of trends, I think those are the brands that that are winning. So similar to Ashley's Ben & Jerry, you know, you think of Aviation Gin, or you think of brands that are like really quick at hopping on societal conversations that are happening. If we look at, you know, after the holidays last year, there was like a Peloton ad, and I'm a huge Peloton fan, but there was a Peloton ad, and, you know, in reaction to that, the Aviation Gin team, you know, put out an ad that was like right away with the same actress, and that felt into the cultural zeitgeist and like the sentiment that we all felt from that ad. And it was just so quick in execution, so quick in hopping into the conversation, and the timeliness of it. I think at big brands that are, you know, whether that's stopped with like hierarchy or legal, or sometimes, you know, there's a great idea that spurts, but it might take 2 or 3 months to execute on. I think there's a lot to be learned from these very reactive and quick acting brands. So whether that's Gen Z focused or not, I think that's kind of the way that marketing is shifting overall. And I'm definitely a big fan of those brands that are like quick to act. It's almost like act, have conversations, and ask for forgiveness later. I think those brands are winning right now.
Yeah. And that's what Peloton did, because they had an issue right after that ad, and like, you know, they totally, it was a mea culpa, which is, I mean, I think Gen Z and kind of everyone is becoming more forgiving, to your point about like brands don't have to be so polished anymore. Granted, like you can't, you know, just do whatever you want again and kind of act in this way that's kind of a bull in a china shop. But I think Gen Z does have this, they're more forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's more real, you know, for sure. I mean, I think we talked about on our call that I'm sort of envious of this Gen Z generation in the sense that, like, you know, on Instagram, fashion is showing cellulite, and like that never happened when I was growing up. And it, you know, it did put a lot of body pressure on us girls. And not that there's not a lot of body pressure. We're talking about the Kardashians, this, you know, conversation. Obviously, that's a lot of body pressure. But on the flip side, there is this really like authentic, like, this is what's real. Don't airbrush me out. That's like ridiculous. Okay, so this one for Ashley. What lessons were learned from the explosion of the Nathan Padaka Dreams Ocean Spray TikTok clip? Why was it so powerful? Do we think that Ocean Spray sold a bunch more Ocean Spray, or what? What do you think, Ashley, about that?
Well, I'm not that close to the brand, so I don't think I can like specifically talk about like what happened. I think generally, so it's awesome. So we were talking about kind of TikTok and how social has democratized, right, communication and given everyone a platform that wouldn't necessarily have had a platform. When before this year would a video like that have gone viral? Just like, you know, speaking very candidly from the person that was in it, from what they were doing, like, it, you know, so I think like it's awesome to see social, again, giving platforms to people that haven't had it in the past, and then brands acknowledging the power that their consumers or these people have had, or those moments, and then gifting them. And so I think after, if I'm remembering this correctly, he got like a car and all of this Ocean Spray, right? I think that made a difference in his life, for better or for worse. They were trying to, you know, do some good, because he really brought a spotlight to their brand. And so, I mean, outside of that, I really can't speak much more because I don't work on that brand. But I thought it was awesome. And I think, again, it's all to the power of social media. And if you have a phone in your pocket, like, you literally can do anything.
Yep. All right. So I think that maybe this is our last one, and it's fun, Angelique, because for you, it's not really a question, it's a discussion. The 90s vintage explosion shows no sign of slowing down in its unique cross-generational accepted fashion plus performance category. Adidas, Mitchell, and Ness are killing it right now. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think the 90s resurgence is all about like nostalgia. And so there's a lot from the Gen Z I guess content and kind of like music sharing, and I think there's something from the 90s where, you know, there was a resurgence, or there was a mix of like fashion and hip hop and brand, and it all was mixed in together, and that's kind of what helped determine what was doing well and what was trending and what you kind of aspired to do. And I think there's a bit of that back now with like music across platforms that are, you know, starting and stemming trends that then leads into fashion, that then can lead into beverages. So it's kind of like full circle where multiple aspects of culture are informing trends. And for sure right now there's this aspect of utility. So to your question about like performance category plus fashion, obviously we're all at home, we're all, you know, want to be comfortable and lounge and athleisure, but then also bring it to our Zoom calls. So there's a bit of that too that's informing, but I think ultimately it's culture, and to what, you know, Ashley was speaking about, like with the Ocean Spray campaign. I think, you know, music, phone in your pocket, what's trending, plus what you're wearing. I think that's all part of the like the cultural zeitgeist that Gen Z is seeing now and stemming and help bring forward to trend.
All right. Well, thank you so much. David's back here, which means it's our time to pass the torch to the next panel. But this was so fun to speak with both of you today. We got so many questions. I think that everyone could have talked about this for another hour easy. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. So huge thank you to Ashley, Angelique, Gabrielle for kicking off today. That was fantastic.